Our fight to eradicate corruption, maladministration, unethical leaders, and the abuse of taxpayers' money by those in power continues. It's fresh, it's fearless, and focused. The Outer Hour, where your voice matters. Hello and welcome to another Outer Hour. I'm Tom London with you for the next 60 minutes. Join me, Wayne Duvenage, Rudy Heineke and Brendan Slade as we discuss South Africa's biggest issues. Want to hear from you in the comment section tonight. Want to hear what you've got to say about these topics. Want your opinion, want your experience, want to know what life's like on your side of the camera. Tonight we will be discussing the rolling blackouts and, well, I'm trying to find the right word to describe this, and the word that keeps coming to mind is pathetic. The pathetic nature of what we've had to live with since 2008. All the broken promises, all the fancy schemes, all the don't worries, all the I'm shocked, all the family meetings, all the just have patience. How much patience does South Africa need when it comes to the energy crisis and the impact on the South African economy? We'll be discussing that with Brendan Slade, Legal Project Manager at Outer. First up tonight, Brendan has written this brilliant opinion piece titled "The Only Thing That Should Roll in Rolling Blackouts Are Heads." We'll be discussing that in the first half of the show, and then we'll be talking about private sector's role in state capture. What part have private sector played in state capture so far, and what part are private sector playing today? I'd love your opinion on these topics as we roll through the show. Remember that you can interact with Rudy, Brendan, and Wayne via the comment section down below this video, and we'll get to your hellos in just a moment and see who's on first. We'll just do a couple tonight and award our chief whip status. I'm just waiting for the comments to load, and we'll see who's on first. Claire Feldman traditionally has held this title for about 2 years now, but I see that it's getting a little bit more difficult. I see Melissa Whitehorn is first up tonight. So chief whip status goes to Melissa Whitehorn. Well done, Melissa. Hello from Pretoria. Nice to have you with us. The show's producer, Devaney Davids, is also in your comment section. Masego Motsoneng and Samantha van Nispen, Head of Communications and Marketing at Outer, will be looking after you in the Facebook and YouTube comment sections. Rudy Heineke will be on your screen, and in the comment section, Christo Fenter is on board. My favorite time, says Christo. Thank you, Christo, and thank you for joining us. Good to see you on the screen. Jeff P. Scott says, greetings, everybody. Di Gibson says, hi, all. Alex Elshove is on board. Nice to see the familiar names joining us. Don't forget to like and share this program so that we can get it out to more and more South Africans. We talk about the most serious topics that South Africa faces on the Outer Hour. So a like or two along the way and a share would be appreciated. We'll get them out to more and more people. Brendan Slade on your screen in just a moment, but also in the comment section, ready to engage with you. And we'll do one or two more. The CEO of Outer, Wayne Duvenage, is in your comment section. Say hello to Wayne if you like, and say how's it to him. See if you can get a conversation going. Jonathan Murphy says, let the heads roll. Hello from America. Keep up the good fight. Hello, Jonathan. We're in America. Nice to have you on board. Thank you for joining us. Michael John Billsbury out of the Eastern Cape is on board, and Leonard van der Leitgaarden says, hello, everybody. Hope you don't have water shedding. I'm reading more and more reports of water being in scarce supply in the high-lying areas of Johannesburg. Are we facing yet another crisis in Johannesburg and in South Africa? We'll put more of the hellos up as we move through the show. Now, in preparation for tonight's show, I read through Brendan Slade's opinion piece, "The Only Thing That Should Roll in Rolling Blackouts Are Heads." That is available on Netwerk 24. And it will be up on the Outer website, outer.co.za tomorrow. So when you wake up tomorrow and you're going through your day, make sure you go to outer.co.za and read Brendan's brilliant piece. But I was thinking on the way. In fact, I was setting up all the equipment for the show, and I stepped outside, as I do, for a couple of minutes and just catch my breath and collect my thoughts. And all I could hear was generators. And it reminded me of 2 or 3 nights ago, late at night, I made myself some warm milk. That's my, I think as you get older, you become tamer. So I boiled some milk on the gas stove, put a couple of spoons of sugar in, and thought I'll sit outside and relax at the end of a long day. And all I could hear was grrrr. I mean, the air was throbbing from all the generators in the suburb because there was load shedding. And that sound should be a reminder to South Africans. And these are people that can afford to run generators, but that sound should be a reminder to South Africans how pathetic this situation is. It really is a pathetic sound, in my opinion. We're getting so used to it. But let me just play you what I heard on the balcony just before the show. Take a listen to this. And the tragedy is that we are getting used to this. Buffalo. Well, okay, Jonathan, I should have remembered that. Thank you. I mean, that sound is something we're getting used to, and it's a sound we should not get used to. Wayne, I don't know how you feel about the generators we hear in the background constantly and the problems we have getting around town and all the other dramas we have when it comes to load shedding in this country. Let's say good evening to the CEO of Outer, Wayne Duvenage. How's it, Wayne?
How's it, Tom and team and everybody out there? Yeah, it's sad when you start getting used to it, because it shouldn't. And now the listeners were saying is now we have water shedding, and water shedding is a sign of just bad management. I mean, we don't have empty dams. 95% full is the Van der Waal Dam, as far as I understand it, and they can't blame the electricity situation, because we've been here before. We've been in stage 4, 5, and 6 months ago. So it's not that. This is just poor planning. This is sheer poor management of our city. And this is the real issue that we have as well around the country. The local government is collapsing rapidly. And last week, as we spoke, there was a conference on, and yet they don't deal with the real issue. And the real issues are, what are we going to do about people who need to be held accountable, right from Eskom through to the collapsed airlines? It just goes on and on and on. And this is really what keeps us going, what keeps us busy. Yeah, another good day. And we've been ruffling a few feathers, especially in the CETA section.
Oh, good.
Bladed departments. So we might reflect a bit on that. But I think I'm looking forward to the discussion on what is business's role in the defending of our democracy, in the fight against corruption, because they have been largely missing. And we have a breakfast, by the way. We'll announce that next week, coming up in the 2nd of November. Pencil that in your diary if you're in the Joburg area. A nice breakfast with some great speakers, panelists to unpack this real issue. So looking forward to tonight's show.
So am I. And just say hello to Morapedi Mosia for joining us out of Sasolburg. Thank you. We'll put more hellos on as we go along through the show. We'll dip into your comments and questions and pass them on to Wayne, Rudy, and Brendan as we make our way through the outer hour. Now, I'm not going to read Brendan's opinion piece out because it's a bit too long to read on the show, and I don't want to take the delight that you'll feel reading it. It really is a good piece. But let me touch on a few points that Brendan makes. And Brendan talks about, for example, members of parliament and top government officials in South Africa are earning over R1 million a year. Perhaps the least touched when it comes to the problems we face in South Africa are our government workers and politicians, while citizens can barely afford to go grocery shopping. We've spoken about this a number of times on the show, where we get told that we have a CPI figure. I think it currently stands at 7.6%, but the average South African is battling to go and do their grocery shopping now. It doesn't feel like 7.6%, feels like a whole lot more. And then on top of that, you've got Eskom asking for a 38% hike in electricity tariffs. NERSA yet to approve that. Outer has spoken out against that, and we've addressed this on the show before. But Brendan mentions things like high taxes, and I thought we'd start there, Brendan, as we say good evening to you tonight. Brendan Slade is a legal project manager at Outer. Brendan, just explain this high taxes, low services dilemma that we've got in South Africa right now.
How's it, Tom? It's nice to be here this evening. At
Thank
least
you.
We've got some light shining. Just to get to the dilemma we are in, it's an understatement to say we are all frustrated about what's going on. And a very recent example of this no service, high taxes debacle is NERSA was recently approached by Eskom, seeking a 38% tariff increase. So that is, and you literally just mentioned the current CPI of around 7.6%. And if you think about it, we are effectively paying while we are not receiving services. And this is, it's completely unacceptable. And that makes us angry. We've got a national power utility that's got the monopoly over power generation currently. Most of the countries in the dark, the majority of the day, we are now on stage 4 load shedding. And it's just failure after failure after failure after failure. Management issues, corruption. Go read the Zonda report. It's all in there. And then Eskom has the audacity to approach NERSA with a smile on their face, admitting, listen, South Africa, we didn't do our job. We are in this mess because of Eskom management issues. We are in this mess because we didn't plan properly. So forget about Eskom's lack of integrity, forget about Eskom's lack of delivery. They come to us with the audacity asking for more money. On the one hand, they are almost guaranteed, yes, government will fit the bill for whatever shortfalls they have, yet they come to the public, which they need to service, asking for money, which we do not get. That is unfortunately the reality we are sitting in currently. And it's a dire situation if this boat is not turned around.
Yeah, I think South Africans should not forget that. I mean, in this fast news cycle world we live in, where, you know, it's a headline today and tomorrow there's another one, it's easy to forget that this is on the table at the moment and it could cripple many South African families and businesses. I'd like to ask both yourself and Wayne how we got here. And the reason I ask this question is when you talk electricity or energy crisis in South Africa and you read the headlines and you go to the Twitter conversations, the spotlight always seems to fall on Eskom and its CEO and now lately the board. And it looks as if when we discuss this issue as South Africans, that we concentrate on Eskom and say, oh, well, the problem has to be inside Eskom. And I'm not saying there isn't a problem in Eskom or multiple problems in Eskom. It's becoming evident that Eskom is dealing with all sorts of problems. But how did we get here? I mean, this is something that's 14 years old in South Africa, load shedding. How on earth did we get here? I'll start with you, Wayne.
Well, I put it down to political interference. Eskom was a well-run organization, the best utility of its kind in the world for a very long time. And then in about 2007, Brian Damas at the time signed off 2 projects, Medupi and Kusile, 70 billion rand each. And they were going to be finished in 4 to 5 years maximum. And then we saw things going south. He left. And we've had about, I don't know, Brendan, 10 CEOs in the last 12 years. It's a number. And political interference like you cannot believe, and appointments. And this is when Zuma then came into power in 2008 and the shenanigans started. And then what happened is, and I also blame NERSA, by the way, and NERSA was, I think, politically told to keep out of the fight.
Wayne, can I stop you? Can I stop you on that point where you talk about Jacob Zuma coming into power? Because we've got this conversation that goes back and forth on the news channels when we see Machela Koko on television, for example, saying everything was fine when I was running the place, and by extension, everything was fine when Jacob Zuma was our president.
Well, it wasn't really, because the problems don't happen overnight. If you don't maintain, I can run my car for the next 4 years and have no services, but eventually it's going to pack up. And on top of that, the costs of running Eskom went up. So they threw people at the problem. Their staff went up from 30 to 45,000 in that period, with no extra kilowatt of energy put out, by the way, into the system. And our electricity prices started to soar because they needed to cover the Medupi and Kusile debacles, which ran, I think they're standing collectively at about 450 billion from 140 billion rand combined. NERSA, when we went to complain at one of the MYPDs, I think it was 2016, and we showed them that at that stage now, Coco and the team were running roughshod over the processes. the primary energy costs had gone up excessively. And we said to NERSA, but why aren't you holding them to account for this? Why are you allowing them? And then the whole story of Brian Molefe, we don't want to own the bakery, you just want to buy the bread. Well, if you're the only person who buys the bread from the bakeries, you better own the bakery. So his argument was futile. And we've seen coal costs go up and everything, corruption, the coal mafia. It just went south and over these years. So to me, it's political interference, stooges in leadership positions, lack of understanding of what good management means, productivity. If you're not going to put 1 extra kilojoule of energy out, not 1 extra head comes into the organization. That's simple. That's how business runs. And so it's not one issue. And then NERSA is supposed to be looking after us, is looking away. And it just got worse and worse and worse. Now, suddenly everybody sits up, we're in trouble. We got to fix this. Well, it's very late, but it's not going to be fixed overnight by the current management team. But there's a lot of work to do. But I don't know, Brendan, over to you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Wayne. I think the focal point on why we are here currently is political interference. But just to go back to Wayne's reference to the whole Koko era. So I just want to say that in hindsight, it's easy to lay these things out. But at the time, nobody became aware of what was actually going on because we weren't told this is the state of our energy grid. There was no transparency back then. But nevertheless, so just to get back to Koko's era, so we experienced the first phases of load shedding. We were kind of getting used to the lights are going off. We need extra electricity. So at the time, most of our fleet ran on a very low energy availability factor. So what Koko then did is he came with this big, management. I'm here to save everybody. I'm here to keep the lights on. So what then happened is he would ramp up the energy availability of the fleet at that time. And for that short-term period, the lights went on and everybody saw, yes, okay, now we've got lights, everything's hunky-dory. But what didn't happen is Eskom, together with government, which obviously is responsible for the policy, did not make provision at the time for additional generation capacity. So we've got this aging fleet, this vintage set of generations plants. Just keep ramping them up so that they just generate the sufficient amount of energy so that everybody is politically happy, that the votes come in when it's time to vote. Nobody complains. Everything looks hunky-dory. In the meantime, to keep those plants running, you can go read the Zondo report again. Wayne mentioned the coal mafia tenders without making provision for any form of new generation capacity. So the gravy train was very lucrative at the time, and to some extent it may still be. That is why new generation capacity was not put on the table at that point in time, because the lights were shining in the short term. So why should Eskom go the extra mile to make provision going forward?
Your questions for Brendan Slade on this issue, or comments in the comment section down below this video. We've got about 10-11 minutes left on this segment, and I'd like to get as much of your input on screen as possible.
Sorry, Tom, I just wanted to add something as well. Do you remember when Hitachi, when the bids went out for the boilers, I think, on Medupi, and Chancellor House, the ANC's investment arm, said, hold the bus, don't issue the tenders yet. They went and invested heavily into Hitachi. Okay, now you can issue the tenders for the boilers. Hitachi wins. And this is part of the corruption. They knew what was happening. So Chancellor House now makes a lot of money.
And I can't wait to get into that conversation with you, Wayne, because they're in partnership with other private enterprises, and there's all this interference going on, and that forms the part of our big discussion tonight about the role that private sector has played in state capture. It's an incredibly valuable point. Outer has asked the question, do you think there is a solution to load shedding in South Africa's energy crisis? Pop your answer in the comment section down below this video. I'm always intrigued, Brendan, by this debate that rages between energy experts, where you've got one camp that says, no, solar PV and renewable energy is a fallacy, it's a fad, it's not there yet, it's not cheap enough. Coal and nuclear are still the way to go. I'm seeing high-profile people say this even up until this week. Perhaps they're looking for contracts. I'm not sure. And then you've got the other brigade or the other side that say, no, we should be steaming ahead with renewable energy in South Africa. Have you got any examples of countries around the world, and I think you highlight Vietnam in your opinion piece, of countries that are able to add a lot of power to their grid very quickly? Because that's what we need in South Africa, isn't it? We need a lot of power very quickly. So I'm tired of the energy experts arguing and going around in circles on this one. What is Outer's opinion on this?
Well, Tom, let's just clarify this point. There's no particular direction we wish to go. We are not pro-nuclear. We are not anti-nuclear. We are not necessarily pro-renewables, and we are not against renewables. But just getting back to the example of Vietnam, that was a collective effort by government. They got the private entities involved to roll out renewable energy within a year's time, the amount needed to eradicate load shedding completely. So in a South African context, there are experts out there that will preach the gospel about nuclear energy. And I must agree to some extent, in an energy mix of a country like South Africa, there may be a place for nuclear energy. There should still also be place for coal in phasing out, going over to the
But doesn't nuclear take a long time to set up?
Nuclear takes an extremely long time to set up, and it's also very dangerous. It's got much more regulations tied to it. And the costs of erecting a nuclear power plant is astronomical. You can roll out the same quantity of renewable energy at a fraction of the cost that it would cost you to roll out a nuclear power plant. The other thing with nuclear power plants, what do you do with the depleted uranium? You need to have all those checks and balances in place. You need to have a very, very strict safety protocol, policies governing it. And to be frank, we see what our government is capable of. So can you, if you are very honest with yourself, can you foresee our government, with all the credibility issues it currently has, to run a nuclear program in South Africa? I certainly can't. Obviously, with the correct leaders and the correct processes in place, it may be viable. But under current circumstances, and due to the fact that we have cheaper electricity generation capabilities available, which are safer and would alleviate the pressure much quicker, I would strongly advocate now, let's get the renewable energy rolled out as soon as possible.
Am I correct in saying, Brendan, when you wrote your opinion piece, you spoke of South Africa's total energy generation, and just correct me if I'm wrong, it'd be 44 gigawatts. Is that right?
That's correct.
And Vietnam added 9.1 gigawatts of renewable energy to their grid inside 12 months.
That's correct.
A quarter of what we need in total was rolled out by Vietnam in 12 months.
Exactly. So, Tom, the Meridian Economics did a report recently, and they found that if South Africa had installed 5 gigawatts of renewable energy, we would have eradicated 96% of load shedding as it stands now.
Maybe we should get those Vietnamese out to South Africa and help us with our problem. Wayne, I could hear you wanted to jump in there.
Yeah, no, I think, and Brendan's point is a very valid one, and we must also understand that during the Cocoa era and the Molefe era, the bid window, I think, was number 4 for renewables. They dragged their feet for so long. Had they signed those IPP, those independent power producer agreements for the renewables, then do you know that we wouldn't have had 1 hour of load shedding today? One.
Is that because we're clinging to coal?
Yes, they had an agenda. They didn't want the independents coming in. They wanted to make sure that this monolith, this government entity was going to be the sole provider of electricity. They didn't want to allow independents coming in to the extent they did. So, that's a big factor. Now they're rushing, but this is all late. I mean, when these new agreements are constructed and come on stream, it will alleviate a lot of problem. But then old power plants are coming off. So we're in this constant catch-up.
Yeah.
Would have been ahead of the game, as Brendan says. Is like, and another thing is we're sitting now languishing at about 7 or 8% of our energy from renewables. Do you know that California has touched on a few days with 100% of renewable energy? Now, some of it is geothermal and water, hydropower, understand, but a lot of it, most of it is wind and solar. Denmark, also in the 98% renewable energy space. So, you know, while we still have 7%, we need to be pushing renewables flat out. And these arguments that other people come with, yeah, but the wind doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't always shine, just nonsense. Of course we know that, but you plan for that. You have your load factors taken up with your coal and other factors in your peaking hydro energy. But to be having 7% of our energy coming from renewables is just mad.
What's becoming clear in this world of ours is that energy is becoming a focal point for most major economies in the world, and the people who address their energy problems first are going to race ahead in the global economy. And it looks like South Africa will get left behind if we don't do something about it fast, and fast being the operative word. So what do we do, Brendan? We'll get to your comments and questions in just a moment. What does South Africa do, Brendan?
Well, Tom, let's just acknowledge that we've currently got a leadership crisis. We are in a moral decline. This is why we are sitting where we are sitting. So from the viewer's perspective, you need to play a leadership role in your local community where you are sitting right now. If you have the capabilities to install solar at home, do so. If you've got the capabilities to participate in any public participation processes, do so. If you do not possess the knowledge, the technical skills, or whatever, mingle with people and approach organizations who have those skills and who are able to speak on your behalf. So as a collective movement among South Africans, we can bring about the change.
Yeah, I think what as you speak, what makes sense to me is, 40 odd million or however many South Africans we've got now, make this then one of their number one issues in life. If we read up, if we become well versed, if we become vocal, if we discuss this, if we don't leave this thing alone, then perhaps we've got a chance at getting to where we need to be. Our leaders who have led us through this crisis, and I often think, and I'm starting to think that quite firmly actually, that if South African government and SOEs were businesses, they'd all go out of business. There's very little efficiency and a lot of mismanagement and a whole lot of corruption thrown in. And I'm just trying to, Wayne, perhaps this is a question for you. With all of that in mind, that we've got this inefficient government, inefficient SOEs, guys not running things properly, breaking things, dodgy deals. Is it possible to get, 9 gigawatts on board in 12 months, given this maze of corruption and mismanagement and inefficiency that we see?
Well, it should be possible. I think it takes a bit longer just because we are, just battle to make decisions quickly.
Sure.
But I think one good thing that has come out of this crisis is that the gates have been opened. The president has raised the bar. Literally, they've said, anybody who wants to build power, wherever you want to put it, and we will buy it. That was unheard of, that speak, a couple of years ago. So that's good. The regulations have been lifted, and now private. I can tell you right now that in 10 to 15 years' time, more than half of the energy sector will be provided by private players, and it will be competitive. And it will be efficient. That's what we want. When the airlines were regulated and there were no private airlines, we had SAA pushing its rates up. Then when they allowed private airlines came in competition, SAA became uncompetitive because it's government run. So anything that's government run in the business sector becomes defunct. And when you're broke as a country, you can't prop these airlines up. You can't prop up Eskom. The private sector comes in. And that's what we've always said. A government must get out of the business of business and just make sure that the regulations are there, make sure that there's no abuse, that there's good competition, and everything runs smoothly. And that's what we need. We don't need government to try and run businesses. I mean, look
and I mean, we live in a country, we're paying some of the highest taxes in the world for some of the most pathetic services in the world. And that's a situation that can't stay like that forever, not in any reasonable country. All right, let's get to some of the comments and questions that we got on screen. Judy King says, I've been surprised at the amount of shops that are closed when there's load shedding, especially at fairly big centers. How's that possible? It's so distressing to walk around a center and see paper up at the windows and doors of so many shops, because I see the unemployed line growing longer every day. I think we lost 120,000 jobs in the last quarter. It's devastating for those 120,000 people and their families, not just numbers. What are the ways in which we can activate, asks Tallulah Moon on YouTube. How do we activate? I mean, she uses the word activate. How do we activate, Brendan, besides what you've mentioned? How do we become perhaps more politically active?
We need to start asking the real questions. We need to be straight about what the problems are. We need to call a spade, to be quite frank.
Yeah.
So to activate is to mobilize. I don't want to throw cliche words around, but to organize ourselves as communities, to acknowledge that there is a big problem. When you go to the voting polls, do what you have to as a South African citizen, but also know that you as a South African citizen have a responsibility outside of only voting. So be part of your community. I'm going to say this over and over again, but participate where you can participate. And just in true South African fashion, and this doesn't necessarily have to do with the comment itself, but have you noticed as you scroll through online shopping and the Facebook algorithms, what you see popping up is adverts for solar installations.
Plenty.
So
yeah,
plenty. People are quite, well, it's very hopeful, but we as South Africans are opportunistic to make something good out of a situation. And if you have a small business, if you are capable of embarking on something like that to contribute to a greater energy availability for the country, then do so. Because at the end of the day, there are also people that would not be able to afford electricity. There are people out there who cannot afford a solar panel, who live on free basic
the majority.
So the surplus electricity that's generated by private homeowners, the big businesses out there, the mines, the big industry, the surplus generated will subsidize those people as well. So you won't only look after your own interests. You'll also look out for the interest of your fellow South Africans.
I wish when politicians got elected into office, they didn't think, oh, this is my time to eat. Instead, they think this is my time to produce. And I think that's what we need to see coming out of our political leadership and out of elections in South Africa. No, it's not your turn to sit at the trough. It's your turn to sit and cough up for once. The average South African is waiting for you to produce the results. And energy and electricity is a great example. Christina Finnis says, Koko is talking rubbish. It's a perfect example of the Dunning-Kruger effect. He had no idea what he didn't know, but he thought he knew everything. Leonard van der Leyengarten said, the problem is that there are people out there that think that Jacob Zuma did a great job, much better than Ramaphosa, because there was less load shedding during his presidency. Christo Fencer says, outer, deregulate electricity and take political interference out of it. Ali Gule says, welcome aboard Morapedi. That's to an earlier comment. I see that there's a lot of comments coming through. I'm just trying to pick them as we go along. Christine Finnis says, Brian Damas burnt billions of diesel during the Soccer World Cup to keep the lights on, created some of the Eskom debt. Ali says, one day without water is difficult. 8 days is a disaster. One day we'll wake up to find out that the country is bankrupt. Di Gibson says, go independent service producers. Monopolies don't work. Question, says Erwin de Ruyter. Anyone know what happened to the Chinese and Saudi Arabian loans to fix Eskom? Wayne or Brendan?
Rudy might know.
Rudy? Were we going to get some money from China and Saudi Arabia to fix this mess?
It was a while back.
I'm not really on top of that one, but what I can say is that Eskom made a loan as Transnet from the Chinese Development Bank, the CDB, a CDB loan, and I think it was also facilitated, like at Eskom, by Anush Singh, but I don't have all the facts on hand yet.
Yeah, I think that's some years ago. Christine Finnis says, yes, Wayne, Chancellor House made a killing with Hitachi. Jonathan Murphy says wind power is a huge bust, probably not be a good fit for South Africa, too much maintenance needed. You see, people are becoming more and more au fait with this topic. As it becomes a huge issue in our lives, we're reading more about it. Christine Finnis says, will green energy be able to supply enough base load? Anyone want to answer that question?
Yeah, as I said earlier, it's yes, because the whole battery storage issue is becoming a very viable now. Of course, you don't want to do it all, so it's a mix. You want to have a bit of gas in there, you want to have a bit of coal, but you don't want to have 90% coal where we've been, or 95%. And so the baseload issue, as I said earlier on, if countries and regions are running well over 90% on green energy, the baseload argument has been dealt with just through the process. Just
got
understand
it.
that.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
Leon Moore says, why don't we get Vietnam involved instead of the useless Cubans? And let's see if we can find one or two more. I'll read Nick Batulis's comment. It's too large for the screen, but let me read it. The concern is that with all the load shedding, no planning has been done to help the taxpayer. No pointsmen at intersections with result in mayhem. Taxpayers left to try and cope and make provisions with no help when this is not the taxpayer's fault. All provisions come at the public's cost with no reprieve, yet our rates and taxes have increased. The taxes are absurd with nothing in return. More pressure has been put on the consumer, which is not fair. We pay more and more for services which are not forthcoming. It's a type of extortion, extorting money from the taxpayer the legal way, says Nick Batulis. I think that sums up the frustration that South Africans are facing. Urban Derator, another comment I thought I'd bring up quickly. 2015, Ramaphosa was mandated by Zuma to fix Eskom and SAA. Why did he drag his feet? What role has the current president played in all of this?
Well, I think in those days when he was mandated, he was the deputy president. Look, I'm not trying to cover his back. I mean, he's got a lot to answer for. But the political meddling that was going on in the various appointments, I don't think Ramaphosa or anybody could have got in the way of that. They would have been pushed aside. So, in effect, Ramaphosa was a very weak deputy. He kept his head low, and maybe that was a good thing because then he could stand for
strategy.
Yeah. And there's a whole lot of arguments to and for. Not batting for him at all. He's the best of a bad bunch. I probably see it that way. We need change in 2024, and we need it fast. I don't even know if we can last that long. We've got a lot of work to do.
Let me put this question to you, Wayne, before we wrap this up. Jaco de la Rey says, and thanks to Eskom, there's a water crisis in Joburg, Ekurhuleni and Tshwane. Apparently, Rand Water cannot fill the reservoirs because of all the load shedding. And now that we have a water crisis, we've moved on to a next level of a dire crisis. It is time that a class action is instituted against Eskom and the government for all the losses and costs incurred to mitigate load shedding. Is there a legal argument in any of this on behalf of South Africans, Wayne?
I don't know, and I don't think so. And as I said earlier on, we've been in level 6 long time ago, recently, and again. We've been in level 4 for a while. The argument that the city is trying to make on, well, we can't fill our reservoirs fast enough is a futile and weak argument. We've been in a worse power crisis in the past. This is a management crisis that we have in the city of Joburg. And if, let's put it that way, let's say you're at level 8 for a long time, then your role as a metro is to get the generating power, emergency generating, lots of them out there, you hire it, to the water tanks, to the pump stations, and get the water into the reservoirs.
Market plug.
Say, because it's just not on. We don't buy that argument. That's weak leadership.
All right, got it. We'll wrap up with this comment. Tallulah Moon says, I even sort of understand electricity now. And if you're like me, Tallulah, you would have, it's the YouTube rabbit holes and all the different searches we do on Google and the like. I think, Brendan, perhaps we could wrap up on this. We'll move into the next segment of the show. That out of this crisis there's a silver line and comes some opportunity, perhaps, because if we have less and less power coming from traditional sources and more power coming from our own generation and from renewable energy, perhaps South Africa could leapfrog the rest of the world. I mean, am I dreaming?
No, you're not dreaming. It will allow the tariffs to decrease dramatically. Remember, we've currently got a monopoly Eskom at the helm. So once all the independent private power producers come online, competition will be out of this world. We will be seeing a massive decline in tariffs going forward. Of course, a lot of regulation changes and legislative changes need to be made, as well as methodology changes. But if you have low energy tariffs, I mean, that is a very ripe environment for the economy to grow
growth,
beyond it seems.
All right. Well, I mean, private enterprise has been named a couple of times in this conversation. And by the way, if you've just joined us, make sure you read Brendan Slade's opinion piece. Brendan titled it, "The Only Thing That Should Roll in Rolling Blackouts Are Heads." It's on Netwerk 24 or 24, but it will be up on Outer's webpage tomorrow. So you can go to outer.co.za and see exactly what Brendan Slade has to say about load shedding in South Africa. We mentioned private companies and private enterprise and the role they play in all of this. So we want the private sector to get involved in energy generation, but their history over the last 10 years or decade or so, or perhaps more, is far from stellar. I'm talking about the corrupt relationship that government and business has had in the past, and wondering whether it is done and dusted. Is the corrupt relationship and the many corrupt relationships we've seen between government and business over and done with, Wayne?
Yeah, look, there's no doubt that business is the other side of the corruption coin. So, and we've always said that. And very often these are reputable businesses, like the likes of KPMG.
Yeah, big names and the nice big buildings in Sandton.
Yeah. And Hitachis and ABB and SAP, the list goes on. And then there are businesses run by people like the Guptas, who have a specific agenda. So, we've got to think hard. There's two issues here. The businesses that get involved and then find out, oh, that wasn't right, after the fact, after they've been misleading us, what happens to them? What is the punishment? So we see this big issue on Bain, and now they are banned from doing business as a knee-jerk reaction to what happened in the UK. But there's inconsistency there, because McKinsey was worse than Bain, as was KPMG's role. And so we're starting to unpack this issue. And this is the way we believe it goes. Businesses should be banned from doing business with government, and every other business should stop doing business with them until, A, they have introduced the corrective processes internally to ensure the type of behavior that took place never happens again. B, the people that were involved in the corruption are not just allowed to resign. This is what happens. Disciplinary action is taken, and even if they resign before they go, the businesses follow through with the dismissal, because their records need to show dismissal. 3, lay charges, criminal charges against them. 4, while we wait for the NPA to go after them on the criminal charges, lay civil claims, like we didn't have those directors declared delinquent. Until you do that, it's no good paying back the money and saying sorry and asking for forgiveness and doing business. We will not tolerate that.
Well, this is what yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So this is what's missing, Tom, in business. And we speak to business all along, and they are not playing their role. So they allow these directors to pop up in other businesses here and there. And that is unacceptable. It is absolutely frustrating. Business is missing in action when it comes to the systemic issues that they're going to deal with. So yes, you make mistakes, but sadly now, there's a lot of good people that work at Bain that are now don't even want to put Bain on their CVs when they're looking for a job, because somebody head office. So I've worked in the corporates. I would be angry if the company I worked for, some director was out of line, and now everybody's tainted. For goodness sake, fix that person. take them out the system, lay the charges, show that this will never happen in your company again. And those are the companies that we must welcome back and make them also pay in reparations, like support the whistleblower initiatives that are happening, support civil society. That's the good stuff we want to see. Then I would do business with that company. I would do business with Bain, with McKinsey and them if they did that. Until they do that, nobody must touch them.
There's something that executives in big business and government officials, the MPs, etc., have in common. They're all fat cats. They all earn big money. Where's this comment from Scott MacDonald? Big businesses are run by individuals, says Scott MacDonald. Do not blame the business. Charge and convict the individuals. Let me ask Rudy Heineke, who's the portfolio manager in charge of state capture at Outer. In charge of the state capture portfolio, I should say. He's not in charge of state capture. But Rudy, what role have individuals inside these private enterprises played? I mean, what have you seen? You've seen it all.
Tom, yes. I think, we read in the news and see in the media all these big companies, these big names, and, the Bains, McKinsey's, as Wayne alluded to. But we must not forget that government is doing business every day with private businesses in South Africa. They put out a tender and somebody will tender, private business will tender to get that specific, to be that specific service provider. And in the whole procurement process, I think government, SOEs, public bodies should look at their own procurement policies and follow it to the letter, because we have seen that, it's like how many of these contracts have been cancelled because the service provider cannot, produce. And that is the problem. It's not only the big names, but it is also the smaller guys that, get tenders and that cannot produce and is wasting the money of the taxpayer. But just coming back to what Wayne said about McKinsey, I just want to read to you something. Bianca Goodson was a whistleblower. She testified in Parliament and at the State Capture Commission. She was a CEO at Trillion for about 3 months before she saw the light and saw what was going on. And in this week, the NPA said that they're going to pursue McKinsey. And McKinsey's reply to that was, "We believe pursuing McKinsey does not have merit and will not defend ourselves, and we will defend ourselves against any claims." Now, Bianca said, and I think this, makes perfectly sense. She was talking about, like Wayne said, about reparation and what must be done. And I quote her here. She said, "So let's talk a little bit more about your basis for saying that the NPA charging you has no merit. Based on your letter," she said that 1, you apologized. 2, you effected changes within your company, and 3, you have paid back the money. So it's great. That's what McKinsey believes. But then she says, and this is I think, the really important part. She said, "A quick Google search informs me that the definition of reparation is the action of making amends for a wrong one has done by providing payments or assistance to those who have been wronged. To this end, what have you done towards reparations, McKinsey? You alerted the business case, you altered the business case for the 1064 transaction of Transnet, which cost an additional 16 billion rand. Have you paid that back? Yeah. I have lost my job and my mental health after exposing your lies. Have you paid me back?" And that makes sense. It is not like Wayne said, just paying back the money and say
on the contract, fee. Yeah.
It's not only the fees that they must pay back, but look at the damage done. And that is what we call, and that is what reparation should be. And that's what we were looking for. And I think Wayne just summed it up very, very well.
I'm tempted to say, Rudy, as you're talking, could we just ban companies that have caused such damage from doing business in South Africa altogether? Is that possible, Wayne?
It is possible. Sorry, Wayne. Yeah, no, it's possible, Tom. National Treasury has got a restricted suppliers database where all these names of companies that has done, fraudulent business or didn't perform or on the wrong side of the contract. There's a list at National Treasury. That list, the first inscription on that list was done in 2013. 10 years down the line, there are less than 200 inscriptions on that restricted database, suppliers database. So yes, we can do it. Bain's name was added just last week.
So the mechanism's in place. We're just missing a whole lot of names and people.
Absolutely, and the people must report them. Treasury is throwing this back to the public companies, the organizations, SOEs, etc., to say, listen, but you must inform us. We cannot put the name on there, but why can't civil society inform Treasury findings that they have made and say, listen, you know what? Here is proof of real corruption, this and that company involved. Why wait for the entity like, let's say, Transnet or Eskom or SARS or whoever to go and report that at National Treasury? Because it doesn't happen.
So how do we future-proof these relationships, Wayne? I mean, I think it would be naive to think that when a new president came in and we started this drive against corruption in South Africa, that it would just come to a complete end. But if we zoom in on these government and private enterprise relationships that are fraught, how do we future-proof them?
Well, Tom, the new administration is not doing anything about corruption. All that's happened is that at the SOEs where they've tried to clean up, it's harder to be corrupt in that level. But corruption is more rife today than it's ever been. We see it all the time in the SETAs, building schools, building anything that involves infrastructure development. I can tell you now, has 3 to 4 middlemen, and we are paying. For every classroom we pay for, we could have built 3. For every kilometer of road we pay for, we could have had 3. This is the markups that are happening. The corruption is rife. Business is part of it, part of the problem. This is what we're saying. Until government takes the fight against corruption seriously, nothing's going to change, and our role just gets busier and bigger as we do what we have to do, working with good institutions like the NPA and SIU and others who are fighting like hell to get on top of this problem. But they're dealing with everyday crime and corruption today, and they're still trying to deal with the 10-year backlog commission. So, the National Anti-Corruption Strategy Advisory Committee is now in place. That's going to take another 2 years. I don't know what's so difficult about government to say, how much do you need, NPA? How much do we need to introduce corruption courts, specialized courts? Because you have to train those judges. Judging a corruption case, if you don't know what you're looking for, the big lawyers come and they bamboozle you. So corruption courts are specialized judges with a forensic training, everything, that understand how to rule and how to judge on corruption cases. Lots of them, lots of investigators, and go out there and then right from the top, read the Riot Act. Read the Riot Act to everybody, COGTA, anyone, right down to local government. If you are found in wanting and from a corruption point of view, and we can find out, and by the way, they must also set up an amazing whistleblower process. If we find you involved, we will not just fire you, we will criminalize you, we will put you behind bars. That message isn't coming across. That's the problem with this government. But it's hard to put your cadres in jail because they're your mates, they're your sisters and your brothers, and you put them and they've got all these contracts. This is the systemic issue that we have. And until we change the mindset of government, you're not going to do that while the ANC is in power. We have a problem. So we've got to change the mindsets of the public. And on Saturday, we're attending a program with Rivonia Circle and others. How did they do it in New Georgia? These whole movements around getting the power of the electoral vote right. Because what we can't understand is people moaning in Beaufort West and Kimberley and Welkom and Mangaung every year saying, this is bad. All the communities, by the way. And they say, but you put these people in power. And you said that last year and last election. So you must live with the nonsense that you have in all of these towns. You keep putting the crooks in charge of your cities and towns. Yeah. But we've got to change that mindset. And that's a big task. But unless we do that, we will sit here with less
the pain.
And less
I've always said that South Africans, as South Africans, we seem to have a remarkable capacity to deal with pain until it gets too much. But our level of too much is right over there. But I suspect we get in very, very close to it. Wayne, you engage with business people all the time. You come from the private sector. You came from the private sector. What is your opinion on CEOs and boards and chairpersons that you meet when you talk about corruption? I mean, what do you think of the sector you came from?
They fear government. They don't want to challenge government. They do not want to tackle them. They fear the repercussions, that they'll be taken off the procurement lists. They are too busy. Heads are down, stuck in their own boundaries of business. And they're not taking seriously the need to defend this democracy. Now, what does that mean? You need to stand up. So when you've got a business association, so you protect the brands through, let's say, the South African Insurance Agency or the South African Domestic Appliance Agency, all these different business industry bodies, their role is to challenge government when things are wrong. And that's what we did. That's how we started ATA. We took on the e-toll matter through several of the car rental industry at the time. Of course, government came running afterwards and started leaning on these big businesses who then said, oops, let's not fight government, and they stopped supporting ATA. They were chickens. They ran away, and they frustrate me because they don't understand their role. They've got to grow a pair. They've got to stand up and look government in the eye and say, no, we won't. So what happens, Tom? Well, you speak to business and you say, do you pay skills development levy? Yes, we do. Do you know what's happening in the skills development levy? No, it's just a tax we pay. Really?
Yeah, money's been squandered.
About it? Why aren't you tackling the road accident fund? Why aren't you doing anything about the workman's compensation issue? Now, if you're too scared to do it, or if you don't have the time, there's organizations like ours, we'll do it. Will you fund us? No. So business is a big part of this problem. The inaction, the lack of ability to take action is just so frustrating. And so we've got to get on active citizens and do this work despite big business who just want to continue to make profits, whatever the cost is, even if, and I love the analogy that I think it was Hugh Glenister who took on the Scorpions, put it. He said, Wayne, you must understand this about business. If there's one tender left, and it is to make the rope to hang this country with, business will beat the door down to get that tender.
Ain't that the truth? Yeah.
That sums it up.
Ain't that the truth? And sad as well. I've got this theory that as you earn more and more money, so if you're in the business world or you're a politician or you're in public service and you get past that R1 million a year, let's say, these issues we're talking about tonight, well, you can paper over them. You can buy a generator and you can still shop at Woolworths and everything's fine. But here's the thing. While you are earning your fat salary and looking past the problems and looking past the corruption, there are thousands upon thousands, if not millions of people who are suffering because of your cowardice and not standing up to the truth. Yeah.
Their own workers are living in dusty squalor, sewage running through their homes. We saw it, our drivers and that, no electricity even. It's just so sad, but you're right. Too much power rests at the top. The big bonuses are paid there. And you can imagine what happened at McKinsey and KPMG. Oh, here's an opportunity to make $1 billion.
We'll go skiing in Aspen this year.
Bonuses we're going to earn. So look away, and when the internal people say, hey, guys, but we're missing a few processes here, isn't this wrong? You slap them away, you fire them because they become whistleblowers, and you get the business. And that's why we say, well, if you allow that, then you deserve to be treated with no business going forward until you show the real...
I'll add to that. If you're earning a good salary in South Africa and these things we're talking about don't make that much sense to you, then shame on you for looking past the problems that you are partly creating. You're part of the problem. You know, a big salary doesn't excuse you from the mess. Rudy, I mean, we talk about this and I think about whistleblowers, the courageous people, the people who are in these organizations and government who go, hold on a moment, I don't like what I'm seeing, I will stand up. And whistleblower as a word should be heroic, but it almost seems like a swear word if you're working in the corporate sector or government. Oh, that person's a whistleblower. Everyone loves a whistleblower until the whistleblower blows a whistle, Rudy.
Yes, and I think we've seen this. Before. We had whistleblowers on this program before that blew the whistle in SAA, other industries, people like I mentioned, Bianca Goodson, and look, where are they today? They are not those heroes that, in our eyes, they are those heroes, but they're not treated that way. That's one thing. Again, as we said, if you want to, if there's reparation to be done, also think about what these persons lost in their lives. Not getting a job, hardship, and it's if that stigma was sticking to them and nobody wants to touch them, and it is understandable. But I do believe that and hope that will change in the near future. And there is organizations, especially looking out for whistleblowers, and we must support those organizations. We're
running out of time, but perhaps we'll go another minute or two. I always think about how we perhaps as South Africans, we need to learn how to deal with those in power. The people who are in power in the private sector, people who have power in government and SOEs, that as much as we can change people, change parties, change positions, we also need to learn how to deal with the abuse of power in South Africa as a collective, as South Africans. And I think, Wayne, that's where OUTA comes in, doesn't it?
Yeah. You see and I grasp this. I'm having a real go at some of these corporate people that I know.
Good
about and this is our role. We have no fear. We understand business, but we are civil activists. We are citizens that worry about citizens' views. We're not part of the tendering processes. We're not worried about bonuses that go missing if we don't grab this big deal in that. So we will fight for.
And I think that's where load shedding just kicked in on Wayne Duvenage's side. We've got a frozen Wayne on screen. I just take a look and see if all the other connections are okay. Well, all right. Well, let's wrap it up with Rudy Heineke. I think Wayne just lost his connection. And yeah, he's gone dark. Rudy, how do we future-proof these relationships as we wrap up the show tonight? How do we deal with this fraught relationship between the private sector and government?
One thing, Brendan touched on it as well, and it's all about participation. And Wayne said it as well. You must boycott these businesses. Participate in the processes. If there's a whistleblower campaign going on, participate, throw your weight behind it, and then isolate the bad apples. If somebody is trying to do business and he failed the integrity test, what is the guarantee that in a next deal the integrity will be back? So if you fail that test the first time, these people should be isolated. And Wayne said this in the beginning of the program. We had this meeting with one of the CETAs today. And that's why I talked about it in the beginning. All these tenders, it's going to business. It's not the KPMGs, it's not the McKinseys, It's not the Bains, but it is the smaller companies. And the corruption there is just as alive as in these big contracts, the Bains, McKinseys, etc.
I always think of a line when I think of these problems we discuss. If I'm sitting in my job and I've got a responsibility, let's say, I work for government, I work in one of the departments, and I'm earning 1.2 or 1.3 million rand a year. I can see the problems in front of me, but I don't want to say anything. I'm okay, so it's okay, is an attitude we need to get rid of in South Africa. And I think we end off with Scott MacDonald's comment that I've got in front of me. Procurement is rotten throughout the world, says Scott MacDonald. And as I say that, my screen just refreshed. So let's see if I can find this comment so I can read it to you. Procurement is rotten throughout the world until the actual individuals responsible are charged and the company or the department is made to feel the pain of corruption. It will continue. It must not be cheaper to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission. I think that's a fine comment. I'll just reiterate that and read that line again. Procurement is rotten throughout the world until the actual individuals responsible are charged charged, and the company or the department is made to feel the pain. At the moment, it's the average South African who's feeling the pain, and the elite, the cream on the top of South African society, are living at large with generators and solar panels and nice food from the shop down the road, where you just take the stuff off the shelf and don't worry about the price. Well, we know where this anger goes if you leave it unchecked. And I can't say enough about OUTA and civil activist organizations like OUTA when it comes to these issues, because who else is on your side as an average South African in South Africa? Who else is fighting the fight for you? Who else is representing you? Who else is your voice in South Africa? It is only organizations like OUTA and organizations, civil activist organizations, when people, South Africans, stand together, make a collective, start applying pressure. And we've seen their results. We've seen Dudumianis of this world be declared delinquent directors. We've seen how organizations like OUTA have pushed e-tolls out of our lives for years and years and years. There is strength in numbers, and there is strength in numbers when you work through organizations like OUTA. By the way, if you haven't joined this organization, join now. Go to outa.co.za and hit that red button. It's the Join Now button. And even if you haven't got the money to contribute every week, come and join us on the OUTA Hour. Get vocal, get knowledgeable. But if you've got a couple of rands to spare, as Wayne says, for the price of a cup of coffee at your coffee shop once a month, you can support an organization like OUTA and support the voices and the voice that fights on your behalf. I can't say enough about joining OUTA tonight. Get on board. outa.co.za. If you haven't, do it now. Let me thank our guests tonight. I see Wayne is, Wayne's dropped off. But let me thank Brendan Slade. Brendan, thank you for joining us this evening for such an informative conversation. I learned a little bit more about electricity tonight. What I learned was that the Vietnamese are able to put a quarter of South Africa's capacity up in a year. Why can't we? Thank you, Brendan.
Thanks for having me, Tom. Thanks.
And Rudy Heineke, what I've learned from you tonight is that we should ban businesses from doing business with government if they have misstepped in the past, and there is actually a mechanism to do it. Thank you, Rudy.
Yes, test that integrity of your business partner. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you. And Wayne Duvenage, the CEO of OUTA, was on board tonight. And thank you for your comments. We weren't able to put all of them on screen. We try and select as many as we can, but I'm always impressed with what the average OUTA Hour viewer knows about energy, about procurement, about the problems we've got in South Africa. Well-versed and knowledgeable viewers and listeners that we've got. Thank you to you for joining us on this program. I've got a bit of fire in me tonight. I think it was Ali Gule that said that. Tom's on fire tonight. He's got some fire in me. But I think I just represent what the average South African is feeling day to day to day, without any, good times on the horizon. But we know, we've seen it in this country before. We've had massive crises in South Africa before. We've had huge, unacceptable disparity and problems in this country. Change them like that. We can do it again. I invite you to join us again next week, 7 p.m., when we'll have some more topics on the table with more civil activists, with more experts, with more engagement, with more questions from you as we steam ahead towards a better future in this country we call South Africa. For the next 7 days, I wish you love. It doesn't cost anything and the government can't take it away from us. I wish you love. I wish you sunshine. I hope you got enough food in your cupboard, and I hope that emotionally, because that's the other thing we don't talk about, the emotional toll that this takes on human beings. I hope emotionally you make it through intact for the next 7 days for our date, because we've got a date next weekend. Well, not next weekend. It depends who you are and what you look like. No, we got a date next Wednesday at 7 p.m. for the live show. If you've watched Post Live from around the world in South Africa, thank you for joining me. But if not, then join us next week, 7 p.m. for another OUTA Hour. Don't be late. I'm Tom London. And I mean it. It takes 7 days before I see you again. I miss you already. Our fight to eradicate corruption, maladministration, unethical leaders, and the abuse of taxpayers' money by those in power continues. It's fresh, it's fearless, and focused. The OUTA Hour, where your voice matters.